The village of Harrow Creek was a place steeped in shadows, both literal and metaphorical. The houses, built from dark, weathered timber, seemed to huddle together, as if seeking solace from the encroaching forest. The villagers, their faces etched with a perpetual weariness, moved with a quiet, almost spectral grace. Their eyes, however, held a stark contrast, a deep, unyielding fear that spoke of horrors unseen. I spent my days in a haze of fear and confusion, the events of that night replaying in my mind like a broken record. The villagers offered me food and shelter, but their words were sparse, their gazes averted. They spoke of the old ones, the keepers of the pines, and the yellow eye. But their voices were hushed, their words shrouded in an almost reverent fear. One evening, an old woman named Alara, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, and her eyes like pools of ancient wisdom, approached me. She was different from the others, her gaze steady, her voice firm. "You seek answers," she said, her voice raspy but clear. "But some truths are best left buried." "I need to know what happened to Elias," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "I need to understand." Alara sighed, her gaze drifting towards the dark silhouette of the pines. "The Blackwood Pines have been a place of power for centuries," she began, her voice a low murmur. "Before the settlers came, before even the first tribes, the old ones held dominion over this land. They are beings of shadow and whispers, bound to the earth, their power rooted in the ancient trees. The yellow eye," she continued, "is their beacon, their manifestation. It draws those who are lost, those who are weak, into their embrace. Your friend, he was taken." "Taken where?" I asked, my voice a whisper. "Into the heart of the pines," Alara said, her gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. "Into their realm, a place where time and reality bend and break. Few who enter ever return." She then showed me a worn leather-bound book. It was a journal of a man named Josiah Blackwood, one of the first settlers. He wrote of strange rituals, of voices in the night, and of a growing fear that permeated the very air. He wrote of the entities and their hunger. The book was filled with disturbing sketches of tall, gaunt figures with glowing yellow eyes. The journal described the binding, a ritual the old ones performed to anchor themselves to the physical realm. It required a sacrifice, a soul willingly given or taken. Josiah wrote of the first settlers that went missing, and the fear that began to grip the town. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I decided to venture back into the pines. Alara warned me against it, but my resolve was unwavering. I packed a bag with supplies, including a compass, a map I had drawn from Alara's descriptions, and a journal of my own, determined to document my journey. The deeper I ventured into the pines, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches like gnarled fingers reaching out to ensnare me. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The compass spun erratically, its needle unable to find true north. The map, too, proved unreliable, the paths shifting and changing like illusions. The yellow eye, however, was a constant beacon, its sickly glow pulsing through the trees. I stumbled upon a clearing, a circle of ancient stones that hummed with an unseen energy. In the center of the clearing, a gnarled oak stood, its branches reaching towards the sky like twisted arms. The yellow eye pulsed from within the tree's hollow trunk. As I approached, the whispers began, growing louder, more insistent. They were voices of pain, of longing, of despair. They spoke of Elias, his name a mournful echo in the darkness. The ground beneath me began to tremble, and the clearing was filled with the gaunt figures. They emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with the yellow eye's light, their voices a chorus of dread. They moved towards me, their skeletal hands outstretched, their whispers a deafening roar. In that moment I understood. I was not just a witness, I was a potential sacrifice. I turned and ran, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. The figures pursued me, their movements swift and silent. I could feel their presence, their hunger, their desire to claim me. I fell, my body crashing against the forest floor. The figures surrounded me, the shadows looming over me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable, But then a voice, a faint, almost ethereal voice, echoed through the clearing. It was Elias, his voice weak, but clear. "Go," he whispered. "Go now." The figures hesitated, their attention drawn to the source of the voice. I seized the opportunity, scrambling to my feet and fleeing into the darkness. I ran until I could run no more, until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I collapsed against a tree, gasping for air, my body trembling with fear. When I finally returned to Harrow Creek, I was a changed man. The events of the Blackwood Pines had left an indelible mark on my soul. I left Harrow Creek, but the whispers followed me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the world. The journey away from Harrow Creek was a slow, agonizing crawl back into the world of the living. The whispers, however, were my constant companions, a spectral choir that echoed in the hollows of my mind. Sleep offered no respite, only vivid nightmares of gaunt figures and the pulsating yellow eye. The world outside the Blackwood Pines seemed muted, unreal, as if I were viewing it through a veil of dread. I found myself drawn to libraries, to dusty archives, seeking any scrap of information that could shed light on the old ones. I pored over ancient texts, folklore collections, and forgotten journals, searching for answers in the cryptic language of forgotten cultures. I discovered that the old ones were not unique to the Blackwood Pines. Similar entities, or variations of them, appeared in legends and myths across the globe. They were often associated with ancient forests, forgotten burial grounds, and places where the veil between worlds was thin. They were beings of primal energy, feeding on fear, despair, and the lingering echoes of past traumas. One recurring theme was the concept of anchoring, the ritual Alara had mentioned. These entities, bound to the earth, required a conduit, a vessel, to maintain their presence in the physical realm. This could be a physical object, a sacred site, or, most disturbingly, a living soul. The Journal of Josiah Blackwood, which I had managed to copy before leaving Harrow Creek, became my obsession. His descriptions of the binding ritual, of the sacrifices, and of the growing influence of the old ones painted a chilling picture of a town slowly succumbing to a dark power. I began to suspect that the disappearances in Harrow Creek were not isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern, a cycle of sacrifice that had been repeating for centuries. The old ones were not just guardians of the forest. They were predators, feeding on the fear and despair of those who dared to trespass upon their domain. Driven by a growing sense of urgency, I decided to return to Harrow Creek. I knew it was a dangerous gamble, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that Elias was still alive, trapped within the clutches of the old ones. This time, I was better prepared. I armed myself with knowledge, with the stories and rituals I had gleaned from my research. I carried talismans, symbols of protection, and ancient texts that spoke of banishing rituals. I also carried a powerful flashlight and a digital recorder. The return journey was unnerving. The pines seemed to watch me, their branches swaying in the wind like skeletal arms. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and the whispers were louder, more insistent. When I reached the clearing with the ancient stones, the yellow eye was pulsating from the gnarled oak, its light casting long, distorted shadows. The clearing was filled with the gaunt figures, their eyes glowing, their voices a chorus of dread. I stood my ground, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. I recited the banishing rituals, my voice echoing through the clearing. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering, their whispers turning into shrieks of rage. I ventured into the hollow of the tree. The inside was cold and damp, a labyrinth of twisted roots and decaying wood. Deeper inside, I found a chamber, a place where the air was thick with an oppressive energy. In the center of the chamber, a spectral form flickered, a faint outline of a human figure. It was Elias, trapped, his soul bound to the old ones. I spoke to him, my voice trembling. He was weak, his voice barely a whisper, but he recognized me. He told me of the old ones' plan, of their desire to break the boundaries between worlds, to unleash their power upon the unsuspecting world. I used the information I gained from my research, and the talismans I carried, to attempt to break the binding. The figures attacked, their forms shifting, their attacks growing more vicious. I recorded their sounds and their forms with the digital recorder and flashlight. The chamber shook, the earth trembling. The yellow eye pulsed with a blinding intensity. I felt a surge of energy, a force that threatened to consume me. Then, with a final, desperate effort, I severed the binding. The spectral form of Elias flickered and vanished, his soul released. The figures shrieked, their forms dissolving into shadows. The yellow eye dimmed, its light fading into darkness. I stumbled out of the chamber, my body aching, my mind reeling. The clearing was empty, the figures gone. The gnarled oak stood silent, its hollow trunk dark and empty. I left the blackwood pines, this time with a sense of finality. I knew that the old ones were not gone, but their power had been weakened. I knew that the whispers would still haunt me, but they would no longer hold the same power over me. I returned to the world, a world that seemed both familiar and alien. I carried the memories of the blackwood pines, the knowledge of the old ones, and the echo of Elias's voice. I knew that the darkness was always lurking, just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to resurface. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would be ready. The return to normalcy was a jarring experience. The world, with its bustling streets and mundane routines, seemed almost surreal after the chilling isolation of the blackwood pines. I found myself constantly scanning crowds, listening for the subtle shift in the wind that might carry the whispers, and flinching at the sudden flicker of any light in my peripheral vision. The digital recordings I had made in the clearing and the chamber became my obsession. I listened to the guttural shrieks of the old ones, the distorted echoes of their movements, and the faint, almost ethereal whispers of Elias's trapped soul. I analyzed the visual recordings, searching for patterns in the flickering shadows, for any glimpse of the old one's true forms. I sought out experts in various fields, linguists to decipher the ancient language of the whispers, physicists to analyze the energy fluctuations in the recordings, and psychologists to help me understand the trauma I had endured. Most dismissed my findings as the ramblings of a disturbed mind, but a few, those who had glimpsed the edges of the unknown, listened with a chilling understanding. One such individual was Dr. Eleanor Vance, a parapsychologist with a reputation for delving into the fringes of reality. She listened to my recordings with an intensity that made my skin crawl, her eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and fear. "These are not mere hallucinations," she said, her voice trembling. "These are echoes of something ancient, something primal. The energy signatures, the linguistic patterns, they align with accounts of entities that have been described in folklore for centuries." Dr. Vance introduced me to a hidden network of researchers, individuals who had dedicated their lives to studying the paranormal, the unexplained, the things that lurked in the shadows. We shared our findings, our experiences, our fears. We were a community of the haunted, bound together by a shared understanding of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the world. We discovered that the old ones were not confined to the blackwood pines. They were manifestations of a deeper, more pervasive darkness, a force that existed in the liminal spaces between worlds. They were drawn to places of intense emotion, to sites of trauma and suffering, to areas where the veil between realities was thin. We also learned that the binding ritual was not a singular event, but a continuous process. The old ones were constantly seeking to strengthen their connection to the physical realm, to expand their influence, to break the boundaries that confined them. The knowledge was both terrifying and empowering. We were no longer just victims. We were researchers, investigators, warriors against the darkness. We developed new tools, new techniques, new rituals to combat the old one's influence. We learned to recognize their signs, to anticipate their movements, to disrupt their rituals. I returned to Harrow Creek, not as a frightened survivor, but as a seasoned investigator. The village had changed. The fear that had permeated the air had been replaced by a quiet vigilance. The villagers, armed with the knowledge I had shared, were now guardians, protectors of their land. We established a network of monitoring stations around the blackwood pines, equipped with sensors to detect energy fluctuations, audio recorders to capture the whispers, and cameras to document any unusual activity. We developed a system of early warning, a network of communication that would alert us to any signs of the old one's resurgence. We knew that the battle was far from over. The old ones were patient, their influence subtle, their reach vast. But we were also patient, our vigilance unwavering, our resolve unyielding. We were the guardians of the threshold, the protectors of the light, the warriors against the darkness. And though the whispers still echoed in the corners of my mind, they no longer held the same power. They were a reminder, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked, but also a reminder of the strength we had found, the knowledge we had gained, and the hope that we carried within us. The world was not as safe as it seemed, but we were ready. The years that followed were a strange blend of the mundane and the macabre. By day, I navigated the complexities of modern life, holding down a job, maintaining a semblance of normalcy. But by night, I was a sentinel, a watcher in the shadows, constantly monitoring the subtle shifts in the world around me. The network we had established grew, attracting individuals from all walks of life, each with their own unique experiences and skills. We became a clandestine society, bound by a shared understanding of the unseen world, a world that existed just beyond the veil of perception. We developed new technologies, devices that could detect the subtle energy signatures of the old ones, frequencies that resonated with their presence. We created protective wards, sigils, and incantations that could repel their influence. We learned to manipulate the very fabric of reality, to bend the rules of the natural world, to create safe havens from the encroaching darkness. We tracked the old ones' movements, their attempts to infiltrate new areas, their subtle manipulations of human consciousness. We discovered patterns in their activity, cycles of resurgence, periods of heightened activity that correlated with specific astronomical events or periods of intense human emotion. We encountered other entities, beings that existed alongside the old ones, some benevolent, some neutral, some even more malevolent. We learned to distinguish between them, to understand their motivations, to negotiate with them when necessary. One encounter, in particular, stands out. We were investigating a series of strange occurrences in an abandoned asylum, a place steeped in trauma and despair. We discovered a hidden chamber, a place where the old ones had attempted to create a permanent gateway into our world. Within the chamber, we encountered a being of pure energy, a shimmering, ethereal form that pulsed with an otherworldly light. It spoke to us in a language of emotions, of images, of pure consciousness. It was not an old one, but a guardian, a being that had been trapped within the asylum, its energy bound to the site's pain and suffering. We learned that it was trapped, and that the old ones were feeding off of its energy, and using it to strengthen their own gateway. We struck a bargain with it. If we helped free it, it would help us close the gateway. The ensuing battle was a chaotic dance of energy and shadow. The old ones attacked, their form shifting, their whispers turning into sonic assaults. The Guardian, now freed from its confinement, unleashed its power, a blinding surge of light that repelled the darkness. We managed to close the gateway, sealing the chamber and banishing the old ones. The Guardian, its energy now free, thanked us, its voice a symphony of emotions, before fading into the ether. These experiences, both terrifying and exhilarating, became a part of our daily lives. We were no longer just reacting to the darkness. We were actively fighting against it, pushing back the encroaching shadows. We also started to understand the psychology of fear. The old ones fed off of it. So we practiced mental discipline, meditation, and control. We trained ourselves to remain calm in the face of terror. We learned to use our fear as a weapon, to channel it into focused energy, to turn it against our adversaries. The world was changing, albeit slowly. The darkness was still there, lurking in the shadows, but it was no longer unchallenged. We were the guardians, the sentinels, the protectors of the light, and we would continue to stand watch until the day the whispers finally ceased. The passage of time brought both subtle shifts and stark revelations. Our network, once a clandestine gathering of the haunted, began to attract individuals with specialized skills and knowledge. We had cryptographers who could decipher the old ones' linguistic patterns, engineers who could build devices to detect their energy signatures, and even historians who could trace their influence through ancient texts and forgotten rituals. We began to see patterns in the old ones' activity, cycles of resurgence linked to celestial events, periods of heightened activity coinciding with global crises. We realized they were not merely opportunistic predators. They were strategic, calculating, their influence weaving through the very fabric of human history. We also discovered that the Blackwood Pines were not a singular point of origin, but a nexus, a focal point for their power. Similar nexuses existed across the globe, hidden in ancient forests, abandoned cities, and places where the veil between worlds was thin. We began to map these locations, to understand their interconnectedness, to prepare for the inevitable convergence. The whispers, once a source of paralyzing fear, became a tool, a means of tracking the Old One's movements, of anticipating their actions. We learned to decipher their subtle variations, to distinguish between the voices of different entities, to understand the emotions they conveyed. We developed new techniques for combating their influence, rituals that could disrupt their energy patterns, wards that could repel their presence, and even weapons that could inflict lasting damage. We learned to manipulate the very fabric of reality, to bend the rules of the natural world, to create safe havens from the encroaching darkness. One particularly harrowing encounter took place in the ruins of an ancient city, a place where the Old Ones had attempted to establish a permanent foothold in our reality. The city was a labyrinth of crumbling structures and hidden chambers, a place where time and space seemed to bend and break. We encountered a being of immense power, a manifestation of the Old One's collective consciousness, a creature of pure shadow and dread. It moved through the ruins like a phantom, its presence distorting reality, its whispers a cacophony of madness. The battle was a desperate struggle for survival. We used every weapon, every ritual, every ounce of our knowledge and skill to combat the entity's influence. We fought not just for ourselves, but for the countless souls who had fallen victim to the Old One's hunger. In the end, we managed to banish the entity, to seal the gateway it had created, but the victory came at a cost. We lost comrades, friends, individuals who had dedicated their lives to the fight against the darkness. These losses, though painful, only strengthened our resolve. We understood that the fight against the Old Ones was a long, arduous struggle, a battle that would continue for generations. We were not just fighting for ourselves. We were fighting for the future of humanity. We began to train new recruits, to pass on our knowledge, to prepare them for the challenges ahead. We established safe houses, sanctuaries where individuals could seek refuge from the Old One's influence. We created a network of communication, a system of alerts that could warn of impending threats. We also began to focus on prevention, on educating the public about the dangers of the unseen world, on teaching them how to recognize the signs of the Old One's influence. We created educational programs, online resources, and even works of fiction that subtly conveyed the truth about the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of reality. We understood that the fight against the Old Ones was not just a physical battle. It was a battle for the minds and souls of humanity. We needed to awaken people to the reality of the unseen world, to empower them to resist the darkness, to reclaim their own agency. The whispers still echoed in the corners of my mind, but they no longer held the same power. They were a reminder, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked, but also a reminder of the strength we had found, the knowledge we had gained, and the hope that we carried within us. The world was not as safe as it seemed, but we were ready, and we would continue to be. The years bled into decades, and the world shifted around us. Technology advanced, societal structures evolved, and the very landscape of human existence underwent a profound transformation. Yet, the Old Ones remained, a constant, insidious presence beneath the veneer of progress. Our network, now a global organization, had become a silent guardian, a watchful eye in the shadows. We had infiltrated every level of society, from government agencies to scientific institutions, from media outlets to religious organizations. We were the unseen hand, the silent protector, ensuring that the Old One's influence remained contained. We had developed advanced technologies, devices that could detect the Old One's psychic signatures, weapons that could disrupt their energy fields, and even methods of manipulating the very fabric of reality to create localized sanctuaries, areas impervious to their influence. We had also become masters of information warfare, subtly shaping public perception, planting seeds of doubt and fear in the minds of those susceptible to the Old One's influence. We used art, literature, and even entertainment to subtly convey the truth about the unseen world, to awaken dormant instincts, to prepare humanity for the inevitable confrontation. The old ones, however, were not idle. They had adapted, evolved, their methods becoming more subtle, their influence more pervasive. They had infiltrated the digital realm, manipulating algorithms, spreading disinformation, and even subtly influencing the very architecture of artificial intelligence. We found ourselves engaged in a constant struggle, a battle for the very soul of humanity. We were fighting not just against physical manifestations of the old ones, but against their influence on the human mind, their ability to manipulate emotions, to sow discord, to create a world ripe for their dominion. We developed countermeasures, programs that could detect and neutralize the old ones' digital intrusions, algorithms that could identify and filter out their disinformation, and even methods of manipulating neural networks to create psychic defenses. We also began to focus on the next generation, on training children and young adults to recognize and resist the old ones' influence. We established schools, academies, and even online communities where individuals could learn about the unseen world, develop their psychic abilities, and prepare for the challenges ahead. We understood that the fight against the old ones was not just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of humanity. We were fighting for a world where humanity could coexist with the unseen, where we could learn to harness the power of the unknown, where we could transcend the limitations of our physical existence. One particularly challenging encounter involved a cult that had managed to establish a powerful nexus within a major city. They were performing rituals that were amplifying the old one's influence, creating a localized pocket of darkness that threatened to spread like a contagion. We infiltrated the cult, using our network of operatives to gather intelligence and disrupt their operations. We discovered that they were using advanced technology, combined with ancient rituals, to create a psychic bridge, a gateway through which the old ones could manifest in our reality. The final confrontation was a chaotic clash of technology and magic, of psychic warfare and physical combat. We used our advanced weapons and rituals to disrupt their gateway, to sever their connection to the old ones. We fought not just against the cultists, but against the very fabric of reality, which was being warped and distorted by the old one's influence. In the end, we managed to close the gateway, to banish the old one's presence, but the victory came at a heavy cost. We lost operatives, we suffered psychic wounds, and we witnessed the terrifying power of the old one's influence. These experiences, though harrowing, only strengthened our resolve. We understood that the fight against the old ones was a perpetual struggle, a constant vigilance. We were the guardians, the sentinels, the protectors of humanity, and we would continue to stand watch until the day the whispers finally faded into silence.